this morning is our own Sara McGough, and we're real pleased that she's willing to do this for us. Sara is the manager of the Ben May Main Library downtown, and is part of the creative approaches that the library is taking to still provide us with reading materials. So if you are locked up today and next week and need reading materials, look at the website and reserve your books and go by and pick them up. So I think it's really wonderful, the service that they're providing. Sara went to Auburn University for her undergraduate work in English, and she and Daniel were both in the band there, and Rick and I know how that leads to certain things. And so Sara and Daniel were married after graduate school, where Sara got her master's in information systems at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. And they lived in Asheville for 10 years, where both of the girls, Sydney and Lucy, were born. And Sydney and Lucy now attend Mary V. Austin. I don't know how working families continue to do it, but the girls, of course, are involved in things like soccer and violin and church choir and all that kind of stuff. But we're real happy to have Sara with us today. She's going to talk about a time to seek, libraries, past, present, and future. Turn it over to you, Sara.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you everyone for having me this morning, this rainy morning. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. How's that for everyone? Okay. A time to seek, libraries past, present, and future. Again, like Judy said, I'm the manager of the Ben May Main Library Mobile Public Library System. I have 15 years of public library experience in North Carolina and here in Alabama. And I have focuses in administration, marketing, and programming. So today I'm going to talk about the history of libraries very briefly, and talk about libraries today and what we expect in the future, a bit of an unknown future. First, Bible verses. The Bible verse that we're referring to today is about seeking. The interesting thing about that word seek is in the Bible, sometimes it refers to seeking knowledge or seeking wisdom, but oftentimes it refers to seeking revenge or vengeance. So it was very difficult to say how many times that word was mentioned. So I moved on to wisdom and knowledge. And of course, we go straight to Proverbs that is pretty much exclusively about wisdom and knowledge. And I want to read you the first verse. I feel like it's very rooted in these themes for today. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. For attaining wisdom and discipline, for understanding words of insight, for acquiring a disciplined and prudent life, doing what is fair and just and fair and right, for giving prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance, for understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. And here's just a few verses. There's verses all over the Bible about wisdom and knowledge. In the King James Version of the Bible, wisdom is mentioned 233 times. The word knowledge is mentioned 172 times. So again, it's extremely prevalent, and whether you're seeking the wisdom of the Lord or wisdom of understanding of what is happening. So let's move on to some history. So we all are pretty familiar when we think of ancient libraries, of the Library of Alexandria. Its purpose was to collect all the world's knowledge. Originally, it was the Temple of Muses, and that is where the root of the word museum comes from. So it was museum in Greek. It was burned many times. We all think of our history books saying that it was a vast, gigantic inferno and all of a sudden the library was gone. Well, as you see from that picture there, it was a gigantic complex and it burned many times, many different parts of it. Even Caesar was responsible for burning a bit of it in a battle in 48 AD. But it eventually did come to ruin, and other libraries in the Roman Empire popped up. You'll see in the screen to your right, the Library of Celsius in Turkey. So it was built in about 110 AD as a tomb to Celsus, and was built by his son and was completed during Hadrian's reign. It's one of the only examples of ancient Roman libraries left. It was the third largest in Rome. And today, there's a vast detail in the ruins. It was beautiful marbling, staircases, things that are still standing today. So if you were ever to make it way over there to Turkey, this would be something you'd want to see. Romans valued not just the scientific, but also the educational and entertainment aspects of literature. As a result, having your own library was a status symbol. Public libraries also arose in ancient Rome for the use of the people. Rome did believe that knowledge was power, and this saying has generally been reflected in the architecture of the libraries and the temples of knowledge that it built. Julius Caesar began plans for a grand replica of sorts to Alexandria before his death, and then it never came to fruition. Libraries also housed their spoils of war. You have a library in Nebiya, Iraq, in about 7th century BC. I won't butcher the current name, I think it's Isharbana. This was also a tomb in the Assyrian Empire. It was a collection of thousands of clay tablets and fragments, the most famous being the Epic of Gilgamesh. There is also a library standing on that site today. It's a really large, modern library out in just the middle of the desert, but it stands in recognition of this ancient library. Then you have Trajan's Forum in Rome. Again, Rome had many libraries. Emperors built them in honor of themselves. It was a greatest Western library in Alexandria after Alexandria burned, and the only one to survive the fall of Rome. It was also the public records office at the time. Moving forward a little bit into the Middle Ages. So the Roman Empire in the West, but the Byzantine Empire kept libraries going a little more than the Western Empire was able to do, as lots of those libraries were destroyed during battles and the fall of Rome. Private libraries were still very much in fashion during the Middle Ages, again, a sign of wealth and how prosperous you were. The books that were created are largely the makings of Christianity. Monasteries, monks spent their entire lives transcribing and copying book after book after book. They were absolutely beautiful. Their writings, they did they're called illuminations. You see at the bottom of this screen here an illumination. It's art, and many times they were gold painting within these works. You ever heard of the term red letter? Well, that was that beautiful beginning first letter of a book that was often large and ornate, and it was again a sign of wealth. But Christianity really helped preserve the knowledge of particularly Western civilization. There were many libraries in basements of churches, often to protect them from pillaging or any kind of battle or any kind of invasion. You see here this picture of what's called a chained library. So books were obviously very valuable because often hundreds of hours were put into the creation of a single book. So they were chained, and then you could come into the library and it stayed connected to that chain the entire time, and you put it on the little shelf and you read it while you were there. The Renaissance saw the printing press and mass production, mostly of leaflets and things like that. It wasn't quite the book explosion that you think it was, not until a lot later. So you had a lot of printing, a lot of literacy happening during the Renaissance as well, and during that Enlightenment time. Most places with books were still homes or private clubs, and it was still very much a sign of wealth and prosperity and being of a certain class. So we're going to fast forward a little bit to the 17th century United States. You also have, before I move on to this, is the Vatican. Of course, the Vatican is the be-all, end-all of libraries in the world. The vast number of volumes and artifacts that the Vatican has is very much under wraps, very, very secretive, but also just very mind-boggling in the wealth of history that the Vatican Library has. So let's move on into America. So John Harvard, a young minister in Charleston, Massachusetts, died and left his 400-volume library and his entire estate to a newly established college, originally called New College, not a very creative name. In his honor, the now oldest institution of higher education is called Harvard College, or now Harvard University. The collection has since grown to about 18 million volumes, housed in numerous buildings across campus and storage facilities, many of which hardly anybody knows where they all are, but it's definitely not all in one building. In 1731, Benjamin Franklin founded the first successful lending library in the United States. It's called the Library Company of Philadelphia. And you see in that picture, that building that still stands today. You can still go in there today. It was a subscription library supported by its shareholders, and it still is today. Then we have the Library of Congress. You see in that picture the reading room of the Library of Congress. It was founded in 1800. The first collection of the Library of Congress was in ashes after the British burned it during the War of 1812. So in 1815, Congress approved and purchased Thomas Jefferson's 6,500 volume library for $24,000, a measly $24,000. And it founded the recreation of the Library of Congress that was lost in the fire. 1833 saw the first tax-supported public library in the United States and supposedly in the world. It was founded in Petersboro, New Hampshire. Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie is absolutely pivotal to the history of libraries and public libraries for the entire world, but specifically for the United States. Andrew Carnegie was an immigrant. He immigrated to the United States with his family when he was 12 years old and immediately started his hard work. His father was a weaver. He got started with the railroad, Andrew did, at a very, very young age, and it was just perfect timing for him and building his fortune. From 1886 to 1919, the industrialist and philanthropist, donated more than $40 million to pay for a whopping 1,600 new public library buildings in communities across America from coast to coast. This is the equivalent to $6.7 billion in today's money. And Andrew Carnegie had a strong belief that someone could rise from any state to another. You could be a poor immigrant or someone from nothing, and if you educated yourself, you could become anything, which is exactly what he did. The quote there, "A library outranks any other one thing a community can do to benefit its people. It is a never-failing spring in the desert." He had a true passion for this. It did not come from any political motivation or any kind of pat on the back or anything to elevate his status. Obviously, he did not need that with the amount of money that he had, but you also see it in the music world and other parts of culture that Andrew Carnegie just really felt strongly that culture and knowledge was the key to the success of this country. In 1876, the American Library Association was founded. It's the oldest and largest library association in the world. Its founder was Melville Dewey, and you know that from the Dewey Decimal System. In his riveting first publication called A Classification and Subject Index for Cataloging and Arranging Books and Pamphlets in a Library. I'm sure it was a page turner during the time, but it also was the foundation of the Dewey Decimal System. The Dewey Decimal System is I'm going to use the word extremely appropriately. It was extremely and still is Eurocentric. It has a strong Western bias and inherent biases of the time. We still struggle in the profession today with the terminology that was used and can still be found in our classification system, and the just minuscule amount of subject headings and space within the collection to organize anything that's not of a Western historical origin. So it's a struggle in our profession to come to terms with that and try to change that. 1904 saw the nation's first bookmobile. It was to deliver books to the residents of Washington County, Maryland. It could display 200 volumes and store another 2,000 behind its shelves. If you're looking for a children's book, there is one called That Book Woman. It is the story of the Kentucky librarians on horses. So they would go up into the Appalachian Mountains, sometimes extremely remote hollers of the mountains, on horseback with satchels of books, and reach remote families. And this children's book talks of this one librarian's journey to this house to find a boy who is a very reluctant reader. And by the time the story ends, he's fallen in love with the written word. That's one to check out. I'm not even sure if our library has it. It's kind of obscure, but I gifted it to my mother-in-law, who really appreciated that story. Another tidbit is the Junior League of Mobile, which I'm a part of, helped found the Mobile Public Library Bookmobile in 1947. There's a little bit of whether or not we donated $2,500 or $5,000, I'm not really sure. But we also helped staff the bookmobile for at least the first 5 years of its existence. So the modern Andrew Carnegie is Bill Gates in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's the largest private foundation in the world. Its mission to expand educational opportunities and access to information technology. They have given $21 billion to public libraries over the last 23 years. Their real work here is to provide public libraries in low-income communities with the computer, hardware, and software required for community access to the internet, as well as provide support and training for public library personnel throughout the US and Canada. Its charity's initiative and goal is to ensure that if you can get to the public library, you can reach the internet. And this foundation has 3 trustees. There's Bill Gates, Melinda Gates, and Warren Buffett. So again, Bill Gates and Melinda Gates, understood from this basic place that knowledge is power, and getting people access to information will help them to prosper, will help them to gain a better income, gain a better life for their family. They understood these concepts just like Andrew Carnegie did 100 years ago. And they very unabashedly give these extreme amounts of money to especially rural libraries to get that internet access and those computers into those buildings so that people can better their lives. So we owe a lot to this foundation as a profession as well. So, you know, what's going on in libraries today? So we have the Institute of Museum and Library Services. That is on the federal level. And what they do is they compile the basic numbers of libraries across the nation. And I mean, you're looking at 9,000 public library systems with 17,000 branches. And so we as a public library here in Mobile, we have a long statistical form we fill out every year. And we give it to our state organization. In our case, in Alabama, it's the Alabama Public Library Section, or Services, I'm sorry. That's what it's called. We give our numbers to them. They compile the state of Alabama, and then they give it to the federal government. It takes about 2 years for this compilation to take place and all the numbers to be crunched. And last month, fiscal year 2017 was finally published. So like I said, it takes a while to get all these numbers from the local level all the way to the federal level. So in 2017, here is the usage around the country. 172 million registered users. These are people who have a registered library card. That's 55% of the United States population in public library service areas. 1.3 billion visits to libraries. 4 library visits for every American. Now, there are people who never set foot in a library, and there are people who come in every day. So, you know, you have definitely a discrepancy there. 5.6 million programs. This is programs for all ages. You're looking from baby story time all the way up to computer and tablet classes in senior centers and retirement homes. 2.2 billion items checked out. So that includes our e-content. And you know, in the e-content infancy, I'd say about 7 or 8 years ago, a lot of very loyal traditional library users were afraid that we weren't getting the checkouts we needed, or you know, we were going to hurt the library. Well, we count all of those checkouts as well. So it all comes from the same pot of money, and it all goes into our statistics, and it's all part of the modern services we're trying to provide. The 463 million ebook offerings, that's just the content that we offer. And then 258 million computer sessions. So that is every single time a person logs onto a computer. We count that. We have the ability to count that. And that's how many times people around the country are using computers. I suspect and could probably guarantee that the report for 2018 and 2019 will have stronger numbers than this 2017 report. Libraries are doing very well, pre-pandemic, doing extremely well. And of course, fiscal year 20 will see an absolute plummet in our numbers like everyone else is seeing. So that's just kind of where library support by its users stand in our country today. So let me get this to pop up for us. Talk a little bit about your local library system. We have 10 locations in Mobile Public Library System. We're about to add our 11th location in Grand Bay. It will open by October 1st. Grand Bay will have a library. We also have a bookmobile. It's not considered a location, but it is one of our outreach services. So these libraries include the Spring Hill Moore Library, the main library downtown, the Tolmanville, Virginia Dillard Smith Library, the Parkway branch, the Sims Library, it's called Sims Regional Library, the Theodore Oaks Library, Fairland, the Bookmobile, West Regional Library, the Local History and Genealogy, which is right next door to the main library downtown. And then we have a very small library called Trinity Gardens over near the Tolmanville Library. I'll talk to you a little bit about my library. This is the Ben May Main Library. So the library was officially established as the Mobile Public Library in 1902. The Library Association at the time locally appealed to the city leaders in the late 1910s to provide an operating funding for the library, but it didn't get approval until 1925 through a bond issue. Noted mobile architect George Bigslow Rogers established the building in the classical revival style. The new structure, now known as the Ben May Library, was opened on September 15, 1928. I'm already looking forward to that 100-year celebration. The library was closed and extensively renovated and added onto, reopened in 2006. So when the library closed, they completely restored the main 1928 library. And then they added on in the back, made it look very, very similar in style, but we doubled the size. So as a facilities manager, I'm really dealing with two libraries. I'm dealing with a 1928 building and a 2005 building. And I have to understand that even though they renovated it, that there's definitely some quirks to the old building. This particular building is considered the most beautiful library in the state of Alabama, and it's on the National Historic Registry. And also, many people don't know this, but it has a hall, a performance hall called the Bernheim Hall. The family named Bernheim, this was a family that moved to Mobile for business purposes from New York City. And the Mrs. Bernheim was very interested and appreciative of the arts, and her husband donated the funding to add a wing onto the library and create this performance hall. So if you came into our building and you went to the hall, you're walking back into time, into this 1928 theater, the original chairs, the original stage. It's very, very beautiful. And again, this was a gift to her for the appreciation of the arts. We have beautiful Italian marble staircases. The Gulf Coast Ducks used to drive by here downtown, and they said, if you want to be transported into the Beauty and the Beast movie, go inside that library there. And it's true. It's a beautiful reading room. I meant to include a picture in this presentation, and I completely just lost track of that thought. So you see here the beautiful library with the oaks. One thing I love about this building is the windows, which is not a typical feature of libraries. Beautiful windows letting the sunshine in, and when you're on the second floor, you see the branches of the oak trees surrounding the building. My office is in the far back, and I do my daily work about 10 yards from Joe Kane's grave. So he's in the Church Street Cemetery right there that I overlook from my office window. And then another unique thing about the Ben May Library is during Mardi Gras season, the parade from Route A goes by our building 2, often 3 times. And that happens during the week, evenings, on Saturdays. For the evening parades, we close early because if we did not, our staff would get trapped because we have no way of getting out of the area by car. And on Saturdays, we remain open during the day. So you have us going about our business and a Mardi Gras parade going by right there outside the door. So it's a very interesting place to work, very historic, very beautiful. And I'll stop talking about that. I could go on forever. So I'll talk to you a little bit about our funding. So the mayor released 2020-21 budget Friday afternoon. And we have level funding going into next year, which we're extremely appreciative of. You'll see here kind of a breakdown in our funding. We have a nearly $10 million budget. The city of Mobile gives about $7 million. The county gives about one and a half. My little thing's covering that up. City of Saraland gives us money to operate the library in Saraland. It's a joint venture there. We get state aid. So if you were going to look on your internet or phone bill, you'll see a line item for E-rate. That is the money, the taxation that goes into the federal government pot that then gets dispersed to a very local level. So we get E-rate funding every year based on the revenue from the federal government and our population size. And then we have other income in the form of donations and estates and bequests and things like that. One thing to note about our budget is that is everything. That is personnel, that is the electricity bill, the water bill, our maintenance, our lower level maintenance. The city still owns our buildings and does most of the more intricate maintenance of the buildings, but there's other systems that aren't paying their heating bill or their electricity bill through that budget. So there's always little nuances coming from state to state in my profession, the different ways that libraries are structured and organized and their budgets are run, and the accountability is different from state to state. But you see here, it's sort of the city of Mobile gives about 70% of our budget, and 70% of our library card holders are city residents. So it's pretty on par with that statistically, percentage-wise. So here, I'm going to brag about the library system, talking about statistics. These are the statistics from last fiscal year. So you're looking at the fiscal year 2019. We had 199,000 active library cards. In December of last year, we went well over 200,000. So we have 200,000 right now. And we have a population of 317,000 in our service area. So we're doing great there. We had almost 6,000 programs and 130,000 people attend. That is an absolute record number for us. That was kind of our peak. We checked out 1.5 million items. And you see a little bit of a breakdown. We had over 200,000 digital items checked out. We answered over 300,000 reference questions by phone or through email or in person. We had 1.1 million people visit our libraries last year. We have door counters, so we keep up with that every day. And we had 1.3 million database retrievals of various types and 2.5 million website views. Almost 500,000 computer sessions just in our library system. So I mean, we're vibrant, we're needed, we're appreciated in this community. I mean, our numbers are strong. We are our numbers are on par with Birmingham Public, which is the largest. We have higher numbers than Huntsville. They would argue we don't, but we would argue we do. So we consider ourselves the second busiest in the state. And I'm on the marketing team, so I work with a group of people who create the graphics. I don't have that talent, but I get them the numbers and we, present what we want to show just how well loved and used we are in the Mobile region, the South Alabama region. So COVID-19 hits everyone like a ton of bricks. So I think it was March 16th that we closed our doors very, very quickly. A few days before we thought we would, just trying to learn kind of what the school system was doing. So we've had to pivot and adapt and reimagine ourselves in so many ways over the last 6 months. And I wanted to draw your attention to some of those ways. And I've been very a part of all of these different services, whether it was an idea of a group or a single person, that a group kind of makes it happen. But it's been a real team effort. But if you ever have any questions about any of these services, just feel free to get in touch with me. So we very early on introduced a virtual library card, which it's really just a library card that you can apply for online very quickly. And eventually, after we reopen, we will ask you to verify some information for us. But we're trying to get cards in people's hands. We mail you a card as quickly as possible so that you can be reading or enjoying the entertainment. We have curbside services that started back in May. So originally in May, it was you put items on hold through the mobile app. We have a mobile app, or through your library card account, or calling us, and you put things on hold, and then you pull up like you would at a restaurant and give us a call, and we bring it out to you, all touchless. We have Reader's Advisory is what we call it, where if you like a certain author or a certain book, you can go onto our website, click a form, and tell us you liked this, now what? And we cater a bundle for you of about 5 books, and we get those to you through curbside. We also have children's book bundles, so we can do nonfiction, we can do fiction, we can do picture books, early readers. We're coming up with it's called AR, Accelerated Reader, for the school children. They have to read on certain levels to get their points, to get their prizes, and we're creating a book bundle specific to AR. We also have programming during this time. During the summer reading, we had some story walks, so you could come to our locations and walk around a certain path and read the children's book. We have that outside. We're looking into a lot more things like that for the fall when the weather gets beautiful. We have online quizzes. We have digital escape rooms. And our staff has been amazingly creative. You participate in these escape rooms, and you may be doing math, or you may be doing vocabulary to move on to the next stage, or you may just need to know about that particular pop culture phenomenon like Star Wars or Harry Potter or Stranger Things. And then our quizzes, we have a quiz on classical music and a quiz on literature in pop songs. And this is all created 100% by our staff. And as an administrator, I'm in the position where someone comes to me and says, I want to do X, Y, or Z. And unless I have extreme reservations, the answer is yes. And again, I'm not responsible for these amazingly creative quizzes and digital escape rooms. I simply just said, go for it. This sounds great. Let's make sure we proof it before you put it online. But other than that, it's been our staff doing this and really pivoting and saying to themselves, how do we keep people engaged? So again, we have a mobile app, Mobile Public Library in your app store, beautiful app that we started about 18 months ago, maybe a year ago. So what's the overall future? We'll reopen sometime this fall and we'll probably reopen with kind of a in and out service. So come in, browse, get your books, go ahead and do what you need to do as quickly as you can, or use the computer one time and then you're going to need to move on, that kind of thing, until we can find our place a little better. So what's the future? You'll see here on the right side of the screen a very recent August 10th article in Boston Globe. Libraries are about being together. So what do we do now? We have really been, as a library profession, presenting ourselves as a third space in the community. So you have home and you have work, and then you have the library. We want it to be that third place that people want to be. We've really been trying to position ourselves as community centers. And we have meeting spaces, we have programming for all ages. We want the library to be on the forefront of your mind as to what you do during your week and with your family. We are focusing very strongly across the country on job and career assistance. You know, how can we help the economy of our community be strong? And we understand the importance of that at all stages, but again, a strong economy in our communities is going to keep your library funded as well. So we want everyone to be successful and have access and information they need to get the job to support their families. Trying to do a lot with youth development, keep teens active and participating in very safe and positive ways. We have early literacy development. An example of that is here in Mobile. Back on January 1st, we delivered our first Books to Baby packet. Every baby born at Children's and Women's Hospital receives a packet from the Mobile Public Library with a copy of The Very Hungry Caterpillar and an application for your first library card. And that is in support with the Friends of the Library that we have. We focus a lot on community outreach. We really are trying to get out there into the community in ways that you may not immediately think of libraries. We go to Art Walk, we go to Bienville Kids Day, we go to the Business Expo and the Homeless Connect and job fairs. Any opportunity we have to be in a space with a lot of different organizations or different ideas, we want to be there as a library. We'll sign you up for a library card. We have a hot spot, we'll do it right there. Kind of juxtaposing all the great things that we're doing is, of course, we have the potential for some pretty extreme economic changes due to the virus. An example is the city of Birmingham 2 weeks ago released their tentative budget, and it had the library being cut by 20%. That's devastating to particularly have that in one single year. That is the equivalent to branches closing and a large percentages of staff being laid off. I don't know what will come of that situation for Birmingham. That's happening all over the country. Library staff are being furloughed, branches are closing, cities, towns, counties are making very tough decisions, some because they have to now, some because they anticipate a year or two of economic impact from all of this, depending on what happens. You know, libraries are often clumped in with the cultural institutions, cultural entities of a community. And oftentimes that's very much the low-hanging fruit when it comes to budget time and what is vital or necessary versus what is expendable. It's very difficult to really quantify the value of cultural institutions in your community. You saw from my previous slide all the numbers we compile throughout the year, and we do it very sophisticatedly. I mean, we have door counters, we have, you know, our computer system counts the number of sessions, you know, we have our big catalog system that counts checkouts. You know, we're using technology to get to those numbers. But, you know, how do you really quantify the value of story time? Or if you were to ever go to a baby story time, you will see that those babies are interacting. You know, after about the third or fourth visit, they are doing, they've learned already what's going on. They're familiar with the songs, they're engaging with their parent and the storyteller on these levels. You know, the teen impact. If there are teens that can come to our libraries after school and be safe and not out on the streets, that is that is a huge benefit to our communities and to their future. So it's again, this is when it's important, if a public library is ever looking at budget or funding cuts, that's when the community, it's very important for the community to step in and say, this is the value, this is the immediate value in families' lives to this community. And oftentimes, if a library system gets cut very severely, it's a few years before you start to see that knowledge gap or that impact in the community, where you're just not as well off as you were before all those cuts. And you're seeing it with the art museums and the gardens and all of the other, cultural institutions around the country. We're nail biting right now, very much so. And we will be for a number of years. Finally, so I don't know who's been to London. This is the British Museum Library and Reading Room. So I was fortunate enough to study abroad during my graduate years. And we have a final exam before you can get your degree. And this is where I studied. So I live really close to the British Museum. And if you've ever been there, the British Museum is in a square. And the library, this gigantic dome, is in the center. And in 1999, they enclosed it into this gigantic atrium. So I would, a couple of days a week, go over to this gigantic dome library and study for my final exams. Got back to the States. I think about a week later, I took my finals and got my master's of information sciences, which is the equivalent to a master's in library sciences from the University of Tennessee. So I always remember fondly that time of study and that opportunity of traveling abroad. So that is the end of my presentation. I think I did it just in the nick of time. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and get back into the room for any questions.
And thank you, Sarah. First of all, that was wonderful and really both interesting from the historical perspective, but also to just the vast array of all that y'all are doing right now. It's really incredible, and we're really proud to have one of our own guiding so much of that work through you. We just a reminder, folks, if you have a question you want to ask, the easiest thing to do is to unmute yourself, and you may need to turn your video on as well if you want to do that. So as folks are thinking of questions and thinking about questions, Sarah, for me, one of the big ones is, as a highly trained, professional, experienced librarian, what system do you use to organize your books at home?
When we moved 4 years ago, I had the heartbreaking decision. I had to downsize. When you move, I don't have an organization. I'm a disappointing librarian. I don't read that much. And I do have a lot of books, but my kids have a lot of books, and there is zero organization there.
Well, it looks like Janie Sims is unmuted. You have a question, Janie?
No, I thought I had to unmute to hear.
No, okay. No, you're good. You're good.
I have a question. Sarah, especially at your library, what has the library being closed done, or what kind of an effect has that had on the homeless population? I know they depend on the library down there. What has that done to that population?
We really don't have a lot of information on that. Downtown, up until very recently, been extremely quiet. I mean, most people working from home, businesses closed, restaurants closed, us being closed. There's very few people walking around. We're not seeing our day-to-day individuals hanging around. We have a no loitering policy anyway, so you're not supposed to be on the property if we're closed. But I know I'm pretty sure First Baptist feeds the homeless around lunchtime every day because I see them on their stairs waiting. I don't have a lot. I know that McKimmey Place kind of went on lockdown for a long time. Like they're still on lockdown. And McKimmey Place is also about to move out to Azalea Road any day now. I think this kind of slowed them down moving, but we've reached out to some agencies who also don't have very much information. I've seen a few individuals walking around and they appear to be, one gentleman particularly had lost a lot of weight. So I don't have an answer to that right now.
Sarah, in our chat box, we've got Stephanie and Patrick Jacobs asking, do you see curbside pickup remaining something that keeps happening even after the libraries go back to opening?
So I'm part of the group that would make that decision, and we're still talking about it. And I'm personally advocating that it does continue. If nothing else, maybe at our 2 largest locations, because there's just more staff. It cannot continue at some of our smaller locations simply because once we reopen, the nuances of being open is going to strain our staff and they can't do curbside. So it may continue, I hope, at the larger locations. One thing I forgot to mention is we also do scanning, faxing, copying, and printing through curbside. All that's available online.
I had a curbside pickup on Friday, but it was a bag of Georgia peaches from Butch Tigner. So that was
Yeah, Butch is in the August Mobile Bay magazine. Sweet article about him as a storyteller.
Mariana Parker was saying in the chat, thank you so much for all that y'all do and for speaking today. And she was talking especially about some of the mobile apps like Cloud Library and Hoopla. And I can certainly say that Hoopla app in particular, I've done a lot of audio books tied into your phone, and you can do it while you're driving down the road, or you can do it even while because it's on your phone. Like I do it when I'm walking the dog at night, and it's great.
Yeah, we have 500,000 ebooks available. We have hundreds of thousands of movies. We have something called Canopy, which is a lot of foreign and documentaries. You just can't find DVDs in print sometimes now. So that's a place to get those.
Lynn Flanagan was asking if you could tell us about remote access to electronic information databases for research.
So if you have a library card in good standing and it has not expired, then you would go to our website, click on what you're interested in searching, and then put in your library card when prompted. If you are having trouble with your library card, that's a phone call. If you forgot your PIN, that's a phone call. If you do know your PIN and you're just needing to, you have to renew your privileges every year. That's just a way for us to verify your address and stuff like that. You can do that through your account. So it's just a matter of having your library card active.
You were talking about private collections like the Harvard collection that sort of sent the small college into the larger realm. That's part of the story as well of Columbia Theological Seminary, that there was a pastor. He was one of the first board members, Thomas Smythe, who was a leading pastor in Charleston, South Carolina. He had the largest private theological library in the country, and when he died, he gave it to left it in his will to Columbia Seminary, and it vastly increased their holdings, and they became second to Princeton, the second largest, at the time at least, the 1800s, second largest theological library in the country. Just a, really, it's amazing how that can, the growth of the library then turns into growth of institution, and things like even organizations like Phi Beta Kappa deciding whether to come to an org, to open a chapter in a particular college or university, one of the factors is the size of the library in terms of what they're, how they consider top tier academics. So.
Well, speaking of donations, so we weren't able to have our annual Friends of the Library book sale. That brings in a considerable amount of revenue to support our programming. So we still have all those books, and we decided we can't take donations because of, first off, space for storage. And, we would have to be touching all of this stuff. And if we know everybody's cleaning their houses, they've had all this time to clean, and I can't even imagine how many books we would have gotten from garages and attics and everything. But there's two factors involved. We don't have the space to store. We're hopeful to have our sale again in the spring. We thought about maybe the fall, but we know that's not going to happen. So we're hopeful for a repeat for next year.
We'll use this as a last reminder because it connects through both Christian Ed Committee and sometimes through the exhibits that are in there, the Religious Arts Committee. Remember as well, we've got a great church library. If you haven't spent time in there, it's actually, compared to some church libraries I've seen out there, it's really good collection. It's really, it's a user-friendly, easy to navigate. If you've got any questions about it, Elisa Baldwin volunteers so much of her time cataloging and labeling and everything. So she's, there are a number of publications like the Christian Century and Christianity Today and the Presbyterian Outlook that the church has subscriptions to. And so if you're interested in reading up on those, we keep copies of those in our library as well. And the last that I think, is a borrowing language that others have said, this is by no means my idea, but I come back to it a lot, is this right here. This, if you can't see it, this is the Bible. This is my copy, or a copy. That so often we refer to this as a book, and when we think of a book, we think of something with a start to finish, single author who's written through something. But a lot of good biblical scholars will remind us that what the Bible is in and of itself is a library of witnessing, a library of witnesses to what God has been and is still doing in the world. And so just as a library is going to have all sorts of different genres and different time periods and different outlooks on what's written, so too is the case in this library that all of us have access to as well. For the sake of time, I think it's time to close our time together, but thank you so much, Sarah. We're so glad that we got to hear this presentation from you. Some of you have heard Sarah as well in the current issues class before, talk more specifically about libraries serving to the homeless in Mobile in particular, but also more broadly. And I think Judy is probably going to give us one final word on what to look for next week for our last summer Sunday school class. Oh, you're muted, Judy.
It's hard to believe it's almost over. I'm looking forward to fall Sunday school.